Howard says that one of the difficulties with these manuscripts is they're very difficult to decipher. If you look at what's behind me, this is a page from the manuscript that Howard was looking at. And if you notice, the first script that you say is, oh, that looks like, that's something that we can read. But just under that, Nehemia, it's a different script. Can you explain to people why that difference?
So with respect to Howard, it's difficult to decipher for someone who's been trained in biblical Hebrew, who only knows the square script. But you study the medieval cursive and semi-cursive and medial, and there's many different Hebrew scripts. Once you get to know those scripts, they're actually quite easy to read.
Okay, but
some of them are not, to be fair, like the Sephardic cursive, Sephardic cursive from from a relatively early period there's 3 different forms of the aleph on the same line, sometimes in the same 2-word span. So that's a little bit difficult, but this script is quite easy to read. But if you weren't trained in how to read this script, it would be difficult to you.
Let me just say this. You were trained in the ability to do this. And what his point is, he says the people that are interested in it have a difficult deciphering it. The people
actually, Keith, I wasn't trained in this script. So I was trained in a way. I was prepared. I wasn't trained.
You were prepared.
So here's how I was prepared. My first year at Hebrew University, I probably only understood about 80% of what the professors were saying. And I realized if I didn't get someone's detailed notes of what was taught, I would fail my tests. And there were these young ladies who were in my classes, and they wrote down everything the professor said. And I mean everything. This is before people were typing away on the computer. It was written by hand. And literally the professor would sometimes say, okay, this is an administrative matter, don't write this down. And they would write that down too. So I went to 5 different young ladies and I said, can I have your notes? Can I photocopy your notes? And I photocopied them. Mm-hmm. And then I sat down to prepare for the tests, and I opened up the notes and I realized I couldn't read them. But they were in Hebrew. Why couldn't I read them? Because I was taught in kindergarten, I was taught to write Hebrew, but I was taught to write Hebrew the way that diaspora Jews were taught in the 1970s to write Hebrew. The way they write Hebrew in Israel is different. Not only is it different, within Israel it's different. So I had 5 sets of notes, handwritten, and each set of notes used a different alphabet. It was Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, but the bet of one girl was different from the bet of the other girl, of the third girl who was a Yemenite. She had a different bet. And I thought, I'm going to fail the test. What am I going to do? And I started to panic. And then I realized, okay, we had a class in Hebrew epigraphy where you took Paleo Hebrew and you just sat down and you deciphered it. So I sat down and I said, okay, I know that's the word et, because et appears every time there's a direct object. So a determined direct object. So that's the aleph and that's the tav. Okay, we've got the et. I know that's a bet. That's a kaf. And it took me probably an hour for each set of notes, and I deciphered what it said. I determined that's her final nun. That's her final tzadi.
But Nehemia, you said you weren't trained in it and you learned, but guess what? You were in effect
in a way.
Difficulty.
So I did the same thing with this text behind you. I sat down and I learned what the alphabet was. And this alphabet's frankly a lot easier than the notes I had in my undergrad because the aleph looks a lot like an aleph and the hey looks a lot like a cursive hey. I mean, this was easier.
Here's the thing. I just want to establish one thing. Those 28 manuscripts that you scoured the library for, they're in this type of script, different types of script. It's not an easy thing to read. You have learned to read it. So when we're able to have you to discuss...
Oh, they're in a dozen different scripts. They're not in one different... They're not just in this script. They're in, I wouldn't say a dozen. They're in many different scripts because they're from different centuries, from different places. Like the one behind you is an Italian, I would call it a medial script. Those terms are hotly debated.